But who is the author? The invention of photography caused a crisis in the world of art. Up until then, there was only a singular painting. It was unique and it would be exhibited somewhere and couldn't be reproduced. But with the invention of photography, you could potentially have an endless number of works of art. In fact, the fact that they have limited edition prints only points towards necessity to impose a certain number of constraints. In the early 20th century, Walter Benjamin wrote about this in his famous essay, The Work of Art in the Age of Mechanical Reproduction, that would probably be better translated, The Work of Art in the Age of Mechanical Reproducibility. I borrowed or I used a version of this title for my own book, Architecture in the Age of Artificial Intelligence. And what Benjamin pointed out is that unique, almost magical quality of the work of art was shattered, was challenged by the invention of photography. That which withers in the age of mechanical reproduction is the aura of the work of art. Arguably, in the 20th century, with the introduction of artificial intelligence, the issue is not so much the aura, but the question of copyright. In 2018, a very famous year for the introduction of AI generated art, because it was the year in which the first exhibition took place and the first artwork was given, AI generated artwork was given an international award. The first AI generated artwork was auctioned at Christie's for almost $500,000, a sum greater than had been anticipated. The artwork was produced or generated by Obvious, a collective of artists from Paris, and the name was Edmond de Bellamy. But the controversy that surrounds this particular work was who was the author? Obvious had used the code written by someone else and they had tweaked it slightly. Does that make Obvious the author of this work of art, or is it the person who wrote the code? Interestingly, in recently, the UK Court of Appeal has deemed that artificial intelligence cannot be the inventor of new patents. Again, only human beings can be the inventor of patents. Under the French law, computers themselves cannot claim copyright. Copyright can only reside with a human being, very similar to this decision. At the same time, under UK copyright law, the person who has copyright is the one who makes the arrangements necessary for the creation of a work to be undertaken. And this, it seems, is what informed the work by, or this, it seems, is the position taken by Obvious, who defended their actions. We are the people who decided to do this, who decided to put a print on canvas, sign it as a mathematical formula, put it in a gold frame. Mario Klingman has an interesting take on this. Is he responsible for the work of art, or is it the AI that's responsible for this? And for him, very clearly, he sees AI as being a kind of instrument which he uses, as it were, to generate the work of art. He is the one responsible for it. Let's listen to Mario Klinger talking about how he produces his art.
If you hear somebody playing a piano, would you ever ask, is the piano the artist? No. So, same thing here. Just because it's a complicated mechanism, it doesn't change the roles. And Memories of Passersby is a machine that I created that will keep on generating portraits of non-existing people forever. And it can do that because it uses a collection of neural networks. And in this case, I used portraits painted by the great masters from Western European art history. And yes, so now the machine is in this in a cycle where it continuously creates new faces that start changing, that fade away, and it observes itself and creates a feedback loop. It's not a rendered video or a curated print or curated images that I pre-selected. It is doing it at that moment, which is a risky thing because it's a system where you have only a certain amount of foresight what it might do. The piece consists of two screens, of which one will show more female-looking portraits and the other one more male-looking portraits. And then there is a case which was kind of custom made for this purpose because yeah, the computer will not mind that is inside, because that is, of course, it houses a very powerful machine which creates those paintings while you look at them. So I think that's quite magical. A typewriter enables somebody to write a book. For me, well, the keyboard enables me to write code. And then, well, yes, then there are neural networks involved, but maybe you could say they are my brushes that I learn to use. And but in the end, it's always this feedback between me, the artist, and the medium and the material, and is at least like a child that I can say, okay, now you go out in the world alone, and I can trust that you will keep on doing what I hoped you would do for even if I'm not sitting next and still able to change something. So that is kind of like a hard moment for me to say, like, okay, now I believe it's okay to take my hands off the keyboard and let it out in the world. Working with neural networks in these days, it is actually not so easy to create an image this big, and this is 4K. It took me quite some research and different attempts to actually get it to work at this speed, like at real time, and at this size. And well, yeah, not to be bragging, but I don't know many others at this point of time who can do the same. I definitely want to explore the space of portraits more, but on the other hand, I'm also not limited to that. Also want to explore other forms of media or other forms of presentation, so I'm looking forward to what I will be able to come up with next. And I think in these ages where, like, yeah, we have so much information is coming down onto us, like where you can save everything and you can undo and you can copy paste, but no, this thing does not allow that. You have to be there, and yeah, I think when you sit with it, then you and watch it for a while. Well, I hope that people can start appreciating this or get this feeling that I get when I watch it.
Mario Klingman is very clear then in terms of who is responsible for it. If you heard someone playing the piano, would you ask, is the piano the artist? No, so same thing here. Perhaps a more relevant question would be, who composed the music that the pianist is playing? What I find interesting about Klingman's position is the way he describes his neural networks as being children, like children that he trains and then eventually unleashes into the world. And that, in some senses, reminds me of how a student of architecture is trained in a school of architecture and then unleashed into the world. An interesting comparison, of course, would be the way in which a traditional art atelier would work, where there is a master artist who has a whole team of individuals working for him or her, effectively completing that artwork in the style of the master. In some senses, of course, it's exactly how an architectural office operates. For example, in Zaha Hadid Architects, there are some 400 young architects who are producing buildings, as it were, in the manner of Zaha Hadid herself, even though, in fact, now she is dead. One could imagine then in the future that AI would be able to produce architectural designs in the manner of a particular architect long after they have themselves died. Recently, NVIDIA produced a neural network called Gauguin, named after the painter Gauguin. It is obviously a generative adversarial network, hence the GAN in the name. And the idea here is that on the left hand side, you make a few preliminary marks on the screen, and then the neural network interprets those marks and turns it into a photorealistic um, image. Um, that might seem to computer scientists to be an interesting way of operating, but I wonder how artists would think that. So for NVIDIA, it would seem to be a question of who needs Gauguin, the artist, when you have Gauguin, the neural network. If you're an artist, perhaps you might take the opposite view. Who needs Gauguin, the neural network, when you have Gauguin, the artist? To my mind, where this thing could become quite interesting is once an artist were to take this and use it possibly in ways in which the NVIDIA had never imagined. I'm reminded here of the comments made by Gary Kasparov following his defeat by Deep Blue at chess in 1997, where he said, well, it's not so much, what's interesting is not so much the question of human beings versus machines, but the most powerful combination is when human beings work with machines. So, what would Gauguin, the artist, be able to do with Gauguin, the neural network?